Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and do the final keynote speech. Okay, the topic for today I'll be talking about is enterprise architecture. You can't hear me? Okay. Okay, it should be working now. Jeff? Good. Okay. How many of you here are working for the government? Because that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about government transformation. Very often I hear colleagues in Nepal asking, we are working in the private sector, but we don't know what's going to happen to our company tomorrow. It's not listed. Even though it's listed, we don't know how it's traded. We don't know the volume of work we get. What's going to happen if we run out of work or a company closes? So this presentation is going to show you, based on my experiences and experiences around the world, how government is changing, how the way they develop application is changing, and why has it taken so long for Nepal to catch up with that bandwagon. Okay. Here we have a dichotomy. The old applications were developed by enterprise architects. They never followed agile methodologies. They did upfront modeling. They had over 100 artifacts. Artifacts meaning drawings. How does one service extension fit into the other service extension? How does the other application fit into the next application? And everything was set in stone. Everything was according to the book, where people started, show me the diagram, show me the picture. And now we have agile. We need to deliver days and weeks. Just-in-time modeling, 3 to 6 artifacts maximum as we go, and mutable versus written in stone. So that's the trouble. A lot of people, when I talk to you, when I encourage you, why don't you come and work with the government? Many people say, well, it's highly bureaucratic. They don't understand agile. And I'm really surprised that none of the people have actually come from the government of Nepal, even though the largest investors is the government who is deploying services. So there's a big question about what is the job of an architect. They say there is no need for an architect. It should be done by tools. Developers need to do it. Why do we need architects? Why do we create these jobs? And what is the rationale for it? So, the enterprise architecture context. Very, very different. We have reference model. So when we talk about security, we look at security reference model. When we talk about business, we talk about business rate reference model. Database, database reference model. Security, security reference model. And then we have the architecture governance framework. Who is going to govern that? Who is going to manage that? Who is going to see the changes that are happening accordingly? And here are some of the things that the architects work with. You have the entire on performance. How does the business work? Because I'm talking about an enterprise. The hotel we are staying, Aloft, this is an enterprise. Aloft has offices in Nepal. It has a hotel in Nepal. It may have a hotel in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. They operate in the same way. It works, their goals are the same. Even probably the bed and the faucet they use at the bathrooms, they probably look the same. So when a designer designs a program, you make sure that the architect fits in all the hotels, because they are not going to supply very special chairs or very special faucet. Similarly, in the example of application. So, Nepal developed an enterprise architecture back in 2007, and I was one of the guys who actually worked with them to develop one. In 2017, they said that this document is not worth the money. We are going to hire one of the best consulting firms to do it for us. And then they again hired a company to develop an enterprise architecture. Basically on two things. The government of Nepal realized there was difficulty talking from one system to the other system. The systems did not talk to each other. So the main focus was interoperability. And the second focus was how can we make development seamless? How can we give a developer or a developing company a prototype and tell them this is what you need to do in order for you to comply with our standards? So here are some of the systems that I've listed. We need to build ecosystems and non-systems. This is an argument that I've had continuously with the government, because government is more interested to build system. They are not interested to build ecosystem. But the world has failed and realized we have to build ecosystems. We have to develop ecosystems so the systems can emerge from the ecosystem. Need scale and interoperability. Heterogeneity as given the fact that Nepal has gone through a transformation politically. We have state level, we have local level, and we have federal level. So the operations are different, the way they conduct business is different. And we need to have speed to outcome at the same time. Now, if I ask you, when a new government gets elected in Nepal, how much time do they have? The new government, how much time do they have? Normally, traditionally, they say it's 3 years. First year to settle down, and the last year is to prepare for the next election. So the real work, the best work that can ever happen is within that 3 years. So the entire philosophy behind developing that architecture is how can we develop, deploy the entire application within those 3 months of time. So framework that we have been talking about with the government is looking at how can we harmonize agile thinking with enterprise architecture? How can we align it together? How can we combine the vision? Because for a lot of these applications that are rolled out from a government perspective, it needs to have a very strong and compelling vision to sell it, to make people use it. The architectural development in the operations lifecycle. And how do we evolve from one stage of development cycle to the other stage of development cycle? And the requirement of thinking in an architectural perspective throughout the entire development process. So, here, the 4 principles. Now this is where the real trick is. The first one is is individual and interaction. But very clearly, when you go to them, they say, oh, no, मलाई भेट्न नआउनुस्. What are the process and tools you have? Second, working software. I've seen so many of the software that are not working, but they have detailed documentation. Just the opposite. Documentation लिएर आउनुस्. Software काम गर्दै गर्छ, the documentation चाहिँ हामीलाई चाहियो है. Third, customer collaboration versus contract negotiations. The more interested in contract negotiations rather than customer collaboration. And fourth, responding to change versus following a plan. Now these are the 4 principles that needs to be changed in an organization where there is constant push. Where is your plan? तपाईको plan अनुसार काम गर्नु भएको छ कि छैन? Rather than नयाँ requirements how you fit it in the entire development life cycle. So the key principles that we are talking to and engaging different government entities is to specify the value and success criteria up front. How are you going to judge an application is successful for people in the village, in rural area, in Pradesh number 2, in Rohtak district, where I'm from? Who is going to judge it? Is it the person sitting in the Pradesh office, or is it somebody sitting in the ministry office? How are we going to adopt these principles? How are we going to infuse agility to make sure that these large government applications are built within and deployed within the time frame? And then how do we follow an iterative process? And above all, which is very important, the stakeholder consultations, concerns, views, and stakeholders. These things are not developed very well. The government very often thinks that they are the users. They don't think their customers, their voters are going to be using it. So how are we going to infuse this practice within that part? So some of the ways that we work with government and deploy these applications is first defining the vision of enterprise and the constellium of projects that it is supposed to support. Then move into implementation phase A, which we call phase A. We call it ADOPS, which is Architectural Development Operations, and first iteration. And the second iteration, implementing Agile Wave 2, which is ADOPS ADOPS 2, which I will explain in the next slide, so that we can have and we can work towards a faster delivery of applications. So these are the kind of artifacts that they're looking at. 48 artifacts, around 48 artifacts. TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Forum, has prescribed around 54. If you go to any consulting firm, they would not quote less than 10 crores of rupees to develop the 54 artifacts. We've put them together and saying 48 are the ones that are most important. But again, they are very difficult in a sense to be making sure that you have, for example, look at security policy. A lot of agencies don't have one. They cannot implement one, nor they can monitor one. So from 48, you bring down to 24 reduced set of artifacts. Again, the ones that are more important are the ones in red. And the ones that are least important are the ones that are grayed out. So vision, principles, service portfolio, product roadmap, model storming, which is looking at different models to address stakeholder views and concerns. And then how are we going to capture data and how are you going to do the migration? So based on the 24 artifacts, then we develop what is called a minimal viable architectural development operations, which will look at just some of the few ones that are going to make the project delivery faster. So these are all very close to agile thinking and also combines the architectural practices that are required. So how does it work? The most part in the development organization, for developing a government organization, is the vision. Now, the people from India would know this project about Ayushman Bharat, the vision it had, the projects such as Aadhaar, the vision it has, projects such as Bhumi, and other projects also that have been there, because they have to have a very strong, compelling social reason. Okay? You cannot have a government application that has a financial outcome. It has to be a proper social outcome. Developing these visions, looking at quick wins, moving up to your data hub, data storming, application portfolio, standards, and security. This is what we think is the best way forward, looking at some of the examples that are coming from Kerala state, as well as from India, and Bangladesh as well, where they have looked at 4 or 6 weeks, developing teams at work, about 4 to 12, and the last part looking at standards, security cloud, and API management now, which is very, very common development, about 4 to 16 weeks. Now this brings us to the enhanced version of what I just talked about, ADOPS Plus, which looks at some of the artifacts that are required in the business part, a much more scaled down version on application, technology, and data. Because this is how the Open Group describes the architectural framework. You have the architectural vision. The most important is the business architecture, which apparently is the most important focus, because applications are there to serve a business, the applications are to serve a cause, and to provide value to the stakeholders. Then you have the data, and then the technology. Okay, this is a similar one. Okay. Now, critical success factor. The key important things in application development, which is often very much overlooked in the government sector, development sector, is a passionate leadership. Now, leadership is not only political leadership. There has to be a technical leadership as well. There has to be an administrative leadership to take that project forward, to take that vision forward. And strong institutional mechanism that's going to help bind agile communication together. Now, what we feel most of the government organizations, including the ones in the most developed countries, is inversion of Conway's law, which states, organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of their communication structure of these organizations. अर्थ मन्त्रालय स्वीकृति दिएपछि सबै मन्त्रालयहरूमा जानुभन्दा अगाडि त्यो एलएमबिएसबाट गएर अर्थ मन्त्रालयले त्यो रकममा चेन्ज गर्नको लागि उनीहरूले 21 दिनको म्याद दिन्छ 21 दिनपछि त्यसलाई ब्लक गर्नै पर्छ ब्लक गरिसकेपछि त्यो रकमान्तर भएर अर्थ मन्त्रालयमा आउँछ अर्थ मन्त्रालयबाट डिस्कसन भएर अनि बजेटमा पेश हुन्छ This is how our ministry works. But this cannot be how the application works. Let me give you another example. If a local body takes a certain amount of tax for your business, the local body will then keep certain amount of tax within themselves, and they will pass on certain amount to Pradesh, to the province. पैसा लिन साथ तुरन्त त्यहाँ पठाउनु पर्छ र त्यसको भरपाई हामीले तुरन्त पाउनुपर्छ right? Because this is how the organization communication happens. भाउचर भर्दाखेरि एउटा लिङ्क भाउचरको उसलाई दिनुपर्छ एउटा ब्याङ्कमा जानुपर्छ एउटा चाहिँ त्यो व्यक्तिसँग हुनुपर्छ किनभने पछि झन्झट भयो भने हामीले त्यो तीनटै भाउचर मिलाएर हेर्नुपर्छ This is how communication barriers are doing. But a lot of applications don't work. So rather than looking at it from a communications perspective, you have to look at it from the other way around. Restructure systems, build teams, refactor, establish agile communications, and in order to overcome is have agile communication teamwork. Define clear goals and deadlines, and the most deadliest one is agile procurement process. Your application is ready to be launched. You have 3 days before the next cycle starts. तर हामीलाई हार्डवेयर किन्नलाई नै 6 महिना लाग्छ तपाईले पहिले किन किन्नु भएन पहिला हामीसँग पैसै थिएन अब अहिले रकमान्तर गरेर आयो अब तपाईहरुले जहाँ भए पनि राखिदिनु पर्यो चलाइदिनु पर्यो किनभने हामीले टेन्डर गर्नुपर्छ लोएस्ट किसिमको सामान किन्नुपर्छ र त्यसमाथि पनि त्यस्तै प्रकृतिको सामान किन्नुपर्छ जुन पहिला हामीसँग थियो This is what one has to keep in mind when they start the project, whether the agile procurement is in place or not. So, form a core work group, detail agile framework, mesh up artifacts, undertake government consultations, recommend practices. So we've set the time frame around is 3 months. Because until and unless you do this, you cannot be saying that the architecture is working on the artifacts. It will take him 3 weeks to complete all the artifacts or 3 months because the development people cannot wait. So working together with the development team and developing the architecture as you go along in terms of iteration is the most meaningful way forward. So the final 2 slides, it's important. I hope you guys will agree to me when you go back home. Talk to your congressman, or if you're in Nepal, talk to the person you've elected, and tell them, we need to build ecosystems. We should not be building applications. Because many governments in the world have failed because they developed an application. Because the next application is going to replace that application. The next application would replace it, because applications are moving faster. But if you develop a good ecosystem, you can have many applications simultaneously that will host and provide value to your stakeholders. So these are some of the examples in terms of smart cities. We will build smart cities, that's the government says. But you can't build smart city, you can only build smart city ecosystem. And finally, these are some of the positions I've said. Hopefully in Nepal also, we will see them coming in government organizations, in semi-private organizations, where we have process engineers, release managers. Of course, we have that, but more in terms of business, because whatever we are talking, whether business you are in, insurance business, banking business, payment business, they have been going on since 1800s. They have not changed. What has only changed is the technology. What has changed is the reference architecture. So, thank you very much. It was really nice talking to you.